Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. We're really excited to have you here, and we're really excited for this conversation, which is something we talk about a lot, and we realized we should have some training to talk a little bit more about campus food services and how they actually operate. So I'm really excited for the great conversation and learnings that we're going to have tonight together. Again, if there's anyone new, if you need English to French translation, just click on the little globe in the chat at the bottom of your screen, and you can switch channels, and feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and ask questions and have some dialogue as we go along. For those who don't already know, my name is Brittany McGuire, and I'm the Senior Good Food Program Lead at Meal Exchange. We're a national charity that has inspired and empowered students to create healthy, just, and sustainable food systems for over 25 years. We act as a catalyst for change by empowering students, facilitating campus collaboration, and advocating for good food. Our vision is to create a resilient post-secondary communities all across Canada where students have access to good food that upholds their well-being and values. Before we get started today, we just want to take a little moment to acknowledge that the national staff, are currently located in Toronto on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. Personally, as a settler, I believe that I have a responsibility to learn about and amplify the voices and calls to action of Indigenous peoples, both here and across so-called Canada. As an organization, Meal Exchange recognizes that we have not sustainably embedded reconciliation into our organizational culture and programs. Our organization's intention currently is to begin that internal process of reflection in order to better understand what it means to work towards reconciliation and addressing Indigenous food security in a meaningful way. I invite everyone here to just take a moment to reflect on your own intentions and actions towards reconciliation in your own work and regions before we continue. And if you have any thoughts about that or want to share the territories that you're currently living on, feel free to add that in the chat so that we can share it with one another. Thanks for sharing that resource, Jamie. That's a really great resource to learn on what territories you currently live if you don't already know. Oh, and just to let everyone know, you can actually change your name because some of you came through a particular link which had our colleague Aya's name on. So if you go hover around where your face is on the screen, you can see with 3 little dots. If you click on that, you should be able to change your name. You can also include your pronouns there or what campus you might be located on or any other information. But so that we're not all Ayas, you can change that. And let us know if you have any trouble with that. So I'm going to turn it over to our executive director now, Suman Roy, who's going to talk to us much more about campus food and how it actually operates. And I'm really excited to hear what he has to say and for all of you to learn from his incredible experience in this area.
Thanks a lot, Brittany. Welcome, everybody. It's so good to see you coming and spending your afternoon and evening an hour and a half with us. Today, we're going to talk about campus food systems. And when I say campus food systems, I'm going to say this, that as students, we always see different food providers. We see people talking jargons, language that a lot of times we don't understand. And trust me, I've spent almost 18 years in campus food services as an operator. Sometimes I still don't understand. So don't beat yourself up if you don't understand. And we're going to slowly peel the onions one layer at a time today to get to the bottom and understand a little bit about campus food. So today what we're going to cover is who are the food service providers, food service contracts, what that look like, what do we understand of them, how do we access contracts, supply management piece of it, where do the foods come from, how do campuses choose where to get the food from. We always hear the word, oh, the campus gets a kickback for the food that is bought. What does that even mean? So we're going to slowly unwrap that, and there'll be a Q&A session at the end, and then there'll be some strategies, resources that you can have uh, in your grip that will actually help you make a difference on your campuses. And then we're going to wrap up the evening. If you have any questions, please feel free to type it over in the chat, and between Jamie and Brittany, one of them will actually manage it, and in the Q&A, they can read it out, and I'll try to answer the best I can. And once again, before I even start and go to the next slide, one thing I want to establish right now is every campus, we have overall around 245 campuses in Canada, post secondary campuses. And all the food service contracts, though there are some common nuances, they might look, every contract might look different. So, what we are going to talk today is generally what is the general things that's happening and what we can learn, but keep in mind that there will be specific nuances in contracts that we are not able to talk about. And we're going to talk later on to figure out how we can actually get those questions answered. So, we're going to get there. Next slide, please. So, who manages food on campus? And this is something that we hear a lot of different things. So there are generally four different models, and the fifth one is kind of a mix of all the four or three or whatever that looks like. So one is third-party food service companies, which we all have heard. The big giant food service companies, large or small, it could be any, who come in, manages the food service on contract. Really simple. You all have heard of them. When we take examples, you will actually know who they are, because probably in all or most of your campuses, one of those big giants are present in some capacity. The second is the large brands like Starbucks, like Tim Hortons. In a lot of cases, they are managed by the third party contractors, the third party food service companies, but in quite a few cases where they don't, and these brands manage themselves on the campus. It is totally based on the contract they have. So, giving you a quick example on that, I don't know if anybody's here from York University, but in York University campus, they have something called York Lanes. And York Lanes has its all different food outlets on that lane, and every outlet is individual owners or individual brands. So no food service company is managing those businesses. So it is an option. Not a lot of places, but quite a few places you will see, especially the brands like Mr. Sub, Mr. Subway, Pizza, and Pizza Hut, and quite a few cases they manage their own. The other one, which we all, if we don't know, we all think it is a great idea, is self-operated model. What that really means is the campus itself runs its own food services. So there's no third party. The campus, all the people who work in food service actually are employees of the university or the college, and campus runs. They are completely responsible for everything. And the fourth one is student run food services, like the student union, like Loaded Ladle. So these are student bodies actually running some part of the food service. I am not familiar with any campus in Canada where the student union or the student bodies run the complete food operation on the whole campus. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I just don't know if there is. But generally, in most campuses, there is one or two operations that is actually given to the student union or somebody like that to run. And the fifth one is a mix of a couple different, two or three different models that we just mentioned here. So there could be Chartwells or Sodexo as a main food service provider. There could be a Starbucks have a kiosk of their own, and there could be one building that's run by the campus itself. So a great example for that, let's say, University of Toronto downtown campus, which is amazing. And I'm going back 5 years. So 5 years ago, if you were looking at the food service at U of T, there was Aramark who was running the majority of the food services. There was a couple of large brands on campus, like the Starbucks, and they were running their own. There was two build not yeah there were two buildings that was self-operated, like the University College, and 89 Chestnut was run by university itself, and the student union had a pub that they used to run. So they had a mix of everything, which is kind of really fascinating. So there are models that you see it a lot more than U of T that has a mixed model. Next slide, please. So food service providers, we all know them. It's really easy for us to make them the villain, and we always curse them. Chartwell's, Aramark, Sodexo, Dana, they're the bad guys. We all say that. But we will talk about it a little more. It is, and I come from a very different perspective, that there is good and bad in everything. So it is not that a food service provider means they're the bad guys. And we'll go through that in details in the next few slides. So why do you think institutions actually contract out food service? And I have asked this question to many campus administration, and the first thing they say is, we are not in food business. We don't know how to run food. Let's give it to the professional who knows how to run food. We will focus on education. That's our job. So that is one of the major reasons that keeps coming up. The secondary reason that comes up is the financial challenges. And as you know, and in almost every Canadian campus, money is something that the campuses are really very accountable. So in food business, if anyone understands or knows food, it's a hit or miss. It's really easy to lose your shirt in a food business. That's, if you don't know what you're doing, you will be out of business in no time. So campuses don't want that liability. They don't want to deal with that we're going to lose tons of money on food when we should be focusing that money on education or whatever other reason they will. So they want to pass on the financial liability to the companies. So these are, of course, could be many other reasons, and every reason. These are one of the two big ones. I'll give you an example from Mun, which is in Newfoundland, and I'm going back quite a few years. And I was talking to the administration there, and they have Aramark on campus. And at that time, he did not like Aramark at all, but he kept on signing the contract year over year. So I always tell him that if you don't like having a third party, why are you keeping on signing the contract? And his answer was, I can't deal with trying to find minimum wage food service workers. Let it be somebody else's problem, not mine. So everybody has different reasoning, but the primary reason are these two that we have mentioned here is the experience of running food. It's a complete different ballgame, and the financial liability. So why do some campuses operate their own? We talked about self-op. So why do some campuses do that when the liability is big, when they don't know how to run? I think the biggest reason some campuses do is have more control over campus food, with the hope, and I underline the word hope in bold, to improve operations. I'm going to take example of University of Toronto downtown campus that had Aramark, and almost 5 years ago they moved into self-operating model. The students had continuous complaints about food for years and years and years. University gave Aramark the opportunity to fix it, and it wasn't fixed up to the students' liking, and students kept on giving feedback to the campus saying, nope, it's not working. No, the food is not good. No, the hours are not great. So it kept on, and finally U of T, the top leadership said, enough is enough. We need to focus on the students. Why don't we just do it self-op? We take it in-house. We have full control on the food quality. We have full control on the hours of operation. We want to do it ourselves. So that is one of the primary reason. And that follows to the next one is the student and administration, their dissatisfaction with the provider. So that is one of the major reasons why anybody will. I don't think there is any campus will ever go self-operating model just because it's a good business model. Nobody does that because it's not. And this is a sidebar thing, but just so you know, in a general, if you go to a small restaurant in your neighborhood and ask them what is your profit margin, nowadays a decent, and especially in places like Toronto and all where the rent is skyrocketing, they have a 3 to 5% profit margin, and that too if he's a good operator. So no university wants to get into this business just because they want to have fun and want to have the opportunity to run a food business. It is because they really care and want to help the students and really focus on student food. So in most cases that is the case. Now, how do you find out who manages the food on your campus? Is it one of these big giants? Is it a small company, third party provider? Is it self operating? How do you know? Is that on the second slide or should I just talk about it? I forgot.
You should just talk about it.
I can, okay, perfect. So I think the easiest way that I say is ask the question, go into your food operations and ask, hey, who do you work for? Do you work for the university or you work for a company? And the other thing that I always do is look at what their jackets and the uniforms say. That will tell you most of the places where it's Chartwell's or Aromac or Sodexo, they will somewhere have these companies' logo on their uniform because they're promoting. And if it is a campus, they will have the university name in there. That is in general cases. But the easiest and the best way is to simply ask the question, who do you work for? To the staff, and you will very quickly find out. Keep your eyes on the menus that they post or the menu labeling. In a lot of cases, you'll find small logos of the company, especially when it's third party. Because if they're proud of the food, they want to try to show off and say, look what great food we are putting. But also keep in mind, I have worked in campuses where these giants decides not to put their name and hide it because they're not that really proud of their food, maybe, and that's my just speculation. But also, it's really a key. The easiest and the best way to ask the question. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is absolutely fun. What is a contract? So when we talk about a third party provider, there always has to be a contract between the campus and the food provider. It's a legally binding document. And there will be, the contract will have different, there's a lot of, and contracts go really wide into what a contract can have, but it can have anything from the money exchange or how much is the rent to what is the menu of the food, what kind of menus, what kind of outlets will be operated by the provider. It can also uh, say think like anything like what is the price point of the meal plans that they're going to charge, and how long is the contract for, what is the extension possibility. So for example, I have a 5-year contract. Let's take for example University of Toronto again and Aromac. When Aromac went into the campus, they had a 5-year contract extendable to 5 more years. So that is, they know they're there for 5 years, and if they do a half decent job, it'll be extended to five more years. They know that. So when they plan, they are planning to be there for almost 10 years. And then it can also say a variety of different things. For example, is the contract only for a certain number of locations or overall food across the campus? Is it exclusive or is it not exclusive? Can other caterers come on campus and provide food? So everything It is really, most of the contract are very detailed. It is, of course, drawn by the legal team and lawyers of the campus, and it's generally pretty sound. And it looks at both the interest of the provider and the campus. Some important contract details mentioned here, as I said, the pricing, the portion size. I have seen contracts where they actually say what kind of portion size they're going to offer. So, for example, they would say a typical meal will have 6 ounces of protein, 4 ounces of vegetable, and 5 ounces of starch. Or some contracts go that deep. Most of the contracts have hours of operation on what are the hours of operation for each of the outlets. They will lay it in the contract. However, in any of these cases, when they give that much specifics, for example, the menu, the pricing, what should the meal plan be priced, and how much increase year over year, everywhere you will see a clause that says it can be amended when agreed by a campus and the provider. So they always put that clause in because they never know what tomorrow is going to look like. And the great example is what we are living through, pandemic. Nobody knew this was coming. And of course, everybody had to change their operation based on the campuses being closed and students being offsite. So that is why the clause they put it, just to make sure that they are all covered. There are few different types of contracts. And once again, primarily there are three different types of two different types of contract, and a third is a mix of both and a hybrid. And they are a profit and loss and a fee. And I'm going to go into a little bit details because this is really important for you to understand, and especially when you're dealing with your own campuses. A profit and loss account is simply where, let's say, I'm going to use some names just for the sake of it. This is not a real scenario, but I'm just using the name for example. So let's say the contract food service company is Sodexo, and the campus we are talking about is Ryerson. Let's take that for example. So when Sodexo comes in as a profit and loss account, profit and loss contract, what it really means is Sodexo will bring in all the money, they will treat it like a business, and any profit or loss that comes out of the operation, it's Sodexo's. So if they lose money, it sucks to be them. If they make money, yay, we made money for our shareholders. So in really simple way, that is profit and loss. The fee account, however, is slightly different. The fee account is, I'm again going to take Sodexo and Ryerson as examples. So if Sodexo comes in as a fee contract with Ryerson, then all the expenses and the sales all come to Ryerson. And then Ryerson pays Sodexo X amount of dollar fee for managing their operation. So for example, money to buy food, Ryerson is paying for that. Money to pay the labor, Ryerson is paying for that. Money to fill up gas in the catering truck, Ryerson pays for that. And Sodexo, at the end of the month, takes home $50,000 as their fee for running the operation. So the basic difference between these two is in a profit and loss account, the university or the campus has less control on how the operation looks like. Because at the end of the day, it is Sodexo's problem. They need to do what they need to do is make money. For a third-party private company, their first goal and the first responsibility is towards their shareholder. And rightfully so. That's why it's a shareholder, it's a private company. They need to make sure their shareholders are taken care of so the company can keep surviving. So of course they're going to look at profit. They're going to do whatever it takes to make the profit so their shareholders are happy. In the fee account, however, it is very different. The campus has a lot of control because they are spending the money. If they lose money, it is on the campus. If they make money, it is on the campus. The private company who is working really Of course, they're going to do their due diligence to make sure the campus doesn't lose money. However, it is really not their headache. They get an X amount of dollars for being there and managing the show. They will get it at the end of the month, no matter the campus is making money or not, in most cases. Of course, some campuses put clause in there that says you won't get the full money if I lose money and things like that. But most cases, so the campus has a lot of control in the case of fee accounts as compared to P&L accounts, profit and loss accounts. So uh, the other thing that is really important to know is generally, and this is another very financial case, when it's a bigger operation like University of Toronto or University of Ryerson or Lethbridge University, like big campuses like this, food service providers always prefer to do a profit and loss account because there's a chance of making good money out of those. While if it's a small property or a small campus, they always prefer fee account because there is a good chance they're not going to make much money out of it. If it is a fee, they are guaranteed an amount at the end of the month. So in University of Toronto, if people who know downtown Toronto, so say about St. Michael's College or Trinity College, which are part of the UFT banner, however, they run independently, and they both have a private food service company, they were both fee accounts because they're small enough. And for any big company to really go in and try to do a good job, it is difficult to make money out of it. So they guarantee a commission that they're going to get, a percentage they're going to get, or whatever amount they're going to get, and then they run the best of their ability. And the hybrid part of this is also really interesting. In some campuses, you have some which is on a fee, some which is on profit and loss. So going back to University of Toronto, when Aromac was there, Aromac was a profit and loss for the main campus, while Trinity College, while St. Michael's College, they were all on fee. So if I'm not mistaken, at one point, Aromac was running the big campus and one of those small campuses as well, but different financial structure. And but you don't see a hybrid a lot these days. You see primarily go between profit and loss or fee, generally based on size of the campus. Next one. This is fun because honestly, these are some suggestions, but at the end of the day, every campus is so different when you are trying to access the contracts. So, how do you make a change on campus? You need to know exactly what kind of contract the campus have with the provider. Otherwise, how can you ask for change? You don't know. You go and say, oh, we need the hours of operation to be longer, and somebody will give you the excuse, oh, that's not in our contract. You go and say, we need more fresh food, and somebody will look at you and say, sorry, it's not in our contract. That's the easiest way to push students or faculty away who's really asking too many questions. So for you to actually make a meaningful impact, you need to know what's in that contract. And a secret I'll tell you, working in private food service company for 8 years in a very leadership role and working in this business, in 70% of the cases, companies are not following the contract the way it is designed. Because when the contracts are actually written, the legal team is very involved. The campus has a lot of good faith. They want to do good. They want to really support the students. So the contracts are, in a lot of cases, written like that. But the reality happens completely different if there is no held to account process. So I'm going to go in a little details on that a little later. But so how do you access the contract? The answer is every campus is different. When you try to go to your business services and say, oh, can I see a copy of the contract? 9.99% chance they're going to say, nope, it's confidential. Bye-bye. That's the reality of it. because they don't want to show. It is not, for some reason, every campus I've dealt with, they like to really hold it very close to their heart and not share. Because, and this is my speculation is because they know that the contracts are not being followed to the T. They know that it is not being accounted. They are not really holding the companies accountable. So they don't want to show it. They want to keep it confidential. They don't want to show what is the money transaction. They don't want to show what kind of money they are getting or how much they are paying. They don't want to show that in like information. But there are ways you can get that, and it is a longer way. The easiest way is, of course, you walk up to your business services VP and say, I demand the contract. And they suddenly get up, open the drawer, and put it on a silver platter and say, here you go. If anybody have that experience, please let me know, because I want to bow down in front of that campus like administrator. I can almost guarantee you that's never going to happen. So you need to really fight for that. You need to figure out how you're going to go through the Ontario Freedom of Information. And we are saying this Ontario because we are here in Ontario, but every province has a Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, and you're going to go through that. Even then, when you like, it is a long process. You will apply for that. Even then they can say no, then you go to reappeal. So it is not, and I'm being very general here, for a student or a handful of students to go through this process, it's a lot of work. And in a lot of cases, you will see the students starting and then eventually losing hope and giving up and walking away. And that's the reality of it. My recommendation always is, you need to find within your faculty or within your dean or somebody who will champion and support you. That is always easier because they have the resources. If you are pissed off at the food that is being served, they are too, because they are eating in that same cafeteria and the same retail operations. So it's generally not hard to find a champion. And then the faculty will actually guide you through this process, and at least they will take the lead on it to actually get the contract out. And I'm not going to name the campus, but very recently in one of the campuses, it is exactly that is what happened. So this campus was having a lot of challenges. The students were very unhappy with the food service provider. They kept on asking for the contract, and they got the run around. Nobody was sharing. The campus wasn't, the company wasn't. So finally, they got a professor who built up a case saying, I need the contract for research purpose. And then that professor went through the Ontario Freedom of Information and Protection Privacy Act, filled an application. It was denied. Then they reappealed, and eventually they got the contract. And actually, this morning I was with them, actually going through line by line the contract and looking at what can be done, what cannot be done. So it is not impossible. It can be done, but it's a lot of work. So if you need to go that route, I would always say get a faculty or a dean or whoever, somebody who's really has some power, or whether they have power on the campus or they have power of having a lot of student support or resources. Get someone like that on your side. And then together you do the application. Together you work on that. You'll go much farther with that piece. This PowerPoint will be shared with you. So this has got a lot more details on how to get it. You will have this document with you to refer to when you get to it. And when you get to it, I'm sure our team is here to help you in any way you can. We can to guide you and support you through the process. Next slide, please. Supply management. This is really a fun topic for me, because there is so much misnomer out there, so much myths out there, and so much reality that is twisted in the wrong way. How many times have you heard, oh, our food suck, but they have to buy from this company because it's in the contract and they get a kickback? I have heard it n number of times. And the reality is, it is true, but just don't take it on the face value. And we will talk about it a little bit on how it works. So, um, if somebody who don't know how supply management work, I'm going to just give you a quick talk about how the whole process really works. So, right on top is the campus who's buying the food. They generally are buying from a distributor. Distributor example of names are Gordon Food Service, Cisco, Flanagan. These are a couple of major giants within Canada and US, both. US, there is a couple more like US Food Service and all. In Canada, these are the top big ones. So the campus is buying from the main food distributors. Then they are buying the food either from local or regional producers or even national producers or manufacturers or whatever the product is. So if they for it, and it could be within Canada, from US, from anywhere around the world, based on what the food is. So that is the real simple structure on how the purchasing works. Some campuses, however, apart from doing the main purchasing from a main big the giant distributor, they also have some local and regional distributors they work with, especially in the produce, in the vegetables and fruits area, where now the huge trend is local, sustainable. So they do work with smaller vendors. But one of the biggest reason they generally have to go that route of a big distributor is a few different reasons. One is primarily it's easy, because now as a food service operator or for a campus, I don't have to deal with 600 vendors. I deal with only one person. It is their headache, their problem to deal with. So that is one of the main reasons. Me as a purchasing manager at Lakehead University, I don't have the time to really make sure that my 800 products or 3,000 products that we have, everybody is following HACCP rules, food safety rules. Everybody is following every regulation. I don't have the time to do that. So if I'm buying from Cisco, it's Cisco's problem. Cisco needs to do that. For Cisco, it makes sense because they are buying in such a big bulk. It makes sense for them to invest that time to check that company or check that farm out properly. But it does not make sense for an individual campus to actually go through that details. Now, there is something called a preferred vendor. The preferred vendor is the vendors who are actually preferred, and there is a prefer and secondary. So I'll give you an example which will make you probably understand. I am running food services at George Brown College. My first preferred vendor when it comes to pop or drinks is Coke. So that's my preferred. I'm going to keep buying from Coke. However, if there is a situation when Coke factory has a strike, they're not producing. So then the secondary vendor is Pepsi. Then I can go buy from Pepsi. But I will not go buy from Pepsi tomorrow just because I feel like it. Because I have a contractual obligation with Coke as a preferred vendor. And why would they even have a contractual obligation? Because then Coke will say, okay, if we are your preferred vendor, you have 20,000 students on campus. If we anticipate everybody is going to buy, let's say 50% of the students are going to buy one drink a day. So we are selling 10,000 bottles every day. So now I'm going to give you a bulk buying discount. I'll give you a better pricing. I'll do one better. I will actually pay to fix your stadium that you have for the students to play. I will pay for that. But you give me a commitment that for the next 5 years, I am your preferred company. So then what happens for the next 5 years? As a food service operator in George Brown, I am buying from Coke for 5 years. I can't get out of it. Even though today, if I quit my job and Jamie decides to take that job, Jamie comes in and says, I love Pepsi, I hate Coke. Sorry, you can't help it. You still got to buy Coke because we have a contract. We took money from them. They built that stadium that you see for our sports team uh, with their money. So we got to keep that contract. So that is how the preferred vendor system works. And I'm just taking this drinks as an example because this is a huge player. In almost every campus that I know of, these companies like the Pepsi and the Coke, based on who get to them first, and say they spend money on their sports program, they spend money on improving some infrastructure, and has these campuses really by the chain of the throat. Now you took money, you just got to give us the business and keep giving. Doesn't matter what happens. And campuses rely on that money. Campuses always, if they did not take the money from, say, about Coke to fix their stadium, their alumni or somebody had to raise that money. So it's really easy to get from this company, and we got to buy pop anyways. Might as well buy it from these guys, but we get the money to fix my place. So that is a huge, huge thing. The second thing is vendor relationship. So if I'm the purchaser, and I'll give you this example, it's really funny. I personally am a Coke brand loyal, not a Pepsi brand loyal. However, there was one time in my life I moved to Newfoundland, and I was running a golf course, and of course I wanted to. I was setting up actually their food program. So I said, okay, I need to call up my Coke rep here to sign a deal with the Coke guy. And immediately the owner came and said, oh, no, 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 you're not going to do Coke, you're going to do Pepsi. And I said, no, I hate Pepsi. I can't do Pepsi. I have to do Coke. They said, no, the Pepsi guy, the rep, he and me, we used to play hockey together when we were kids. Of course, he's going to get our business. There you go. Then I'm going to drink water because I don't want to drink Pepsi anymore. But beside the point, so the vendor relationship works really well also in a lot of cases. And for example, in one of my job, if I have a relationship with a Coke rep and then I decide to change my job, go to another campus, I'm going to try to see how I can bring my contacts because I have a comfort zone. The same thing works with main companies, distributors as well. I really like my Gordon Food Service rep. Tomorrow I went to a different campus and there is Cisco. I'm going to try to figure out the first opportunity how I can switch them out, get Cisco out and get Gordon Food Service in because I have a good relationship with them. I know they give me the best price. I know they give me a rebate. I know all of those things. But also a few other things which is not as important as these two, but also is quite important is logistics. So I'm going to take UFT as an example because I spent quite a few years on that campus. UFT, one of my biggest thing was I don't want those gigantic tractor trailers to come on campus because if anybody knows University of Toronto downtown, there's a lot of pedestrians. There's students walking all across campus. I don't want, it's unsafe with those tractor trailers to come on campus. So when I'm making a deal with a distributor, I'm putting it in my clause that you have to bring maximum 16-foot cube trucks. You can't bring any more because I don't want big. So those are certainly very equally important. Then I would say, well, I can only take delivery because of my schedule between the hours of 7 a.m. and 10 a.m. That's it. So you need to figure out how to get it in that time. If you can't, then I'm going to go to another distributor and get food from them because you can't keep up to that. And the same thing about product availability is that's of course a very common thing. If and that is generally not the case, especially with the big companies because they all carry very similar products. But if I'm running a campus, I'm in a place where there is a huge Chinese population of students. So I really need to have a lot of Chinese menu items on my menu. And if this food service provider, if the distributor does not have too much ingredients, I really can't do my job. So I'm going to go to another distributor who has a bigger list of ethnic Chinese items. So the product availability is also important, but in most cases that is a small part, because a good distributor, they'll figure out how to get more items to keep a client. And then food safety, that is certainly very important. Most of these private companies, they make sure that very strict food safety protocols are followed, not only with the distributor, but also the manufacturer or the food producer. Because at the end of the day, they are always worried about getting sued. Because if a student gets sick with a third party provider, campus has no liability. They just, if you go and sue the campus will just push it straight back over to the company, and they need to deal with. So that's why the food safety is huge. When we talk of contract terms, it is something really interesting that you need to know about is there are different ways how contracts are done. So one, I'm going to take, for example, if I am University of Toronto, I decide that my main distributor will be Gordon Food Service. So I will have a contract with Gordon Food Service. Now I'm a smart operator. So I have one contract. Now I'm going to go to say about a company called Bridor who makes amazing pastries. I'm going to make a deal with Bridor, who makes croissants and danishes and all, frozen. I'm going to make a contract with them. So now I'm going to tell my Gordon Food Service that you are going to only give me Bridor frozen pastries, nobody else's. So I have a contract here and I've got a contract here. I have two contracts going. So similarly, it could be anything, chicken. I can say I'm going to make a deal with Maple Lodge Farms, and I'm going to tell Gordon Food Service that only pick up chicken from Maple Lodge Farm to give it to me because I have a relationship with them. So contracts work in a very different way, and when we go into, I think the next slide or somewhere when we go into actually rebates, we'll talk about more on that piece. So once again, the diagram shows it really well, is from the fruit producers to the processors, manufacturers, distributors, and go into the food service cafeteria or campus. Next slide, please. So how do food service providers make money? Profit margin, as simple as that. They are selling food. It's like any restaurant, like any hotel, like anywhere that they're selling food, they are looking to make money. A typical restaurant in a big metropolitan like Vancouver, like Toronto, profit margins are not much at all. Only 3 to 5% in best case scenario. And keeping that in mind, it is really important to understand that the food service providers are not making hands over fists money by selling food to you. So if you ask a food service provider that, hey, you need to increase more fruits and vegetables, the first thing they need to look is, okay, if I do that, then will my 5% profit come down to 3 now? And what does that mean? If out of the 5%, if I have to give back to the university 2% of that 5%, now if I add more fresh vegetables and fruits, my profit margin comes down to 3. University will still take that 2%. They're not leaving that on the table. Now I have only 1% instead of 3%. And then suddenly the staff goes on a strike and says, we need a raise. There you go, my why 1%? Now I'm losing 3% suddenly, and I'm paying money to be on this campus. So it's really important to understand, especially when we are talking to food services, that they were working on a very minimal profit margin. It is not a cash cow by any shape or form. And the reason of that is overall our North American food system. It is not something that you can change, not something that I can change. It is our overall, we live in North America where we're in a cheap food system. And it reflects. But one thing that I don't, if I said it here, but one thing that you always know in a general rule of thumb in meal plans and in residence, that is where they make the most amount of money. They make the least amount of money and loses money in quite a few cases when it comes to retail operations. So I, at one point in my career, I was the corporate chef for Sodexo, and we had over 500 campuses, not campuses, but 500 operations from coast to coast to coast, which was campus, corporate office, healthcare, and all of these places. And in campuses, my main thing was in at least on campuses, at least 20 to 25% of the campuses, I used to lose money on retail, but I used to make it up on my residents' meal plans. And there's a reason how it works that way. Think about how many times have all of you, because all of you have probably lived on campus at some point of time, if not living right now, are on a meal plan, but on a Friday night you decide to go out with your friends and have food in a bar or go out in a restaurant, or on the weekend decide to do that, or during exam time you're so stressed you can't go for 3 meals or 4 meals, you're eating one meal and getting going. How many times has that happened? A lot of times. And that is the profit margin, that the food service provider gets the same money whether you show up or not. You're still paying the 3,000 something or 4,000, whatever you pay for the meal plan. And in the food service language, we call it the missed meal factor. The higher the missed meal factor is, the more money going into their pocket. And that is where the profit margin actually suddenly jumps from 3 to 5% to 10, 12%, 15%, 20%, because of how many meals people are missing. And people miss meals for various reasons. For social reasons, maybe the food suck, or maybe you're bored, you don't want to eat the same food over and over and over, and you figure out how to maybe do a part-time job or something to go and raise some money so you can go out and enjoy with your friends, or eat out 1 day or 2 days or 3 days a week. So the food service providers are really banking on those. That really makes them, their margins suddenly jump up. So keep that in mind when you're talking about that. All you can eat, it's really interesting. And deep down, if you guys think about this, you will realize. So all you can eat is, though it sounds like, why would anybody do all you can eat because you'll lose money? That's absolutely never the case. With all you can eat, you can charge a little more, because people have the perception, oh, I'm going to eat so much, so if it's slightly more, I'm willing to pay for it because I'm going to eat. The reality, and if you think about your experience in dining room, the initial first month, students do eat a lot because they're just out of home. They have all the food that is, I call it junk, but it's not really, it's all food, like pizzas and burgers, unlimited access. Let's just party and eat and eat and eat. But after 3 weeks, 4 weeks, the students get bored. Oh, the same thing. So then their food intake goes down. So though they're budgeting for and planning for a huge amount of food that they're going to feed, the reality is the amount of food goes down. And as I've seen in food service operations, as we go closer towards the end of the semester, towards the exam time, the students' consumption of food goes down drastically. And that is where the profit margin starts climbing up for food service providers. So as a food service provider in a dining room, in the first month in September, if I am making around 5 to 6% profit, in November, December, I'm making 25, 30% profit. So it jumps that much because of the missed meal piece and the amount of food that people are eating. Then again, in January, when the semester starts, again, the profit margin decreases, the consumption goes out. And then again, by March, April, the profit again climbs and the consumption goes down. So this keeps on going. So that is why it is really, really interesting and important to understand that A campus that has got higher meal plan, this food service provider has more money to improve the retail or the other cafes across campus because they can offshoot some of the loss and profit between those. If the campus has very small meal plan or residence dining piece, then their hands are tied when they are actually doing retail. So, something to consider. The reason I'm saying all this is because, as students, as meal exchange, it's always easy for us to really demonize a private company and say, well, they can do better, but they're not. But in a lot of cases, and I come from an experience who have worked there, so to really make an impact as the future of change on campuses, you really need to understand both sides of the coin. You really need to make a case for change. That doesn't mean that whatever the private companies are doing in most campuses is a really amazing job. They're not. And we can talk about that forever. But the reality is, when you are having a conversation, you need to make them understand that you understand what they are talking about. Then there will be a mutual respect and willingness for them to make a change. And that's why it's important for you to know the back end operation of a food service. Next slide, please. So rebates. This is a fun topic. How does rebates work? Rebates are same as kickbacks, same as commissions. I like to use the term rebate because it sounds a little more nicer than those kickbacks or commission. So the way it works is for a campus to say that. So my previous example of a Bridor pastry contract and Gordon Food Service distributor contract. So, as a campus, I would go to Gordon Food Service and say, listen, I have a purchasing power of $1 million in a year for food. If I give you the business of $1 million, how much do you think you're going to give me back as a kickback or a rebate? What is the discount you're going to give? So, Gordon Food Service will come and say, okay, I'll give you 3%. Great. I'm getting 3% from Gordon Food Service. Amazing. Then I go to Bridor and knock on their door. Hey, I buy at the end of the year, every year, I buy $150,000 worth of frozen pastries. If you're a preferred vendor and if I give you the contract, how much money are you going to give me back as a discount? So Bridor will look and say, wow, $150,000 business right away for the year. I'll give you 1% or 2% of that. Great. Now I've got 3% from Gordon Food Service, 2% from Bridor. Amazing. So this is generally in the case of a large food service, rebates or discounts work. So they go to the vendors, they go to the actual suppliers to the point that, and happens with almost everything you see that is out there. That is why there's a reluctance of changing brands, changing vendors, because they have a deal going already. Now, if I am a competition of Bridor, I will go and say, okay, how much money is Bridor giving you? If it's a smart campus operator, they won't give that information and say, nope, you tell me what you're going to put on the plate. And if that company comes and says, I'll give you 5%, okay, forget Bridor, though your food quality is really good. I love your pastries, but bye bye. I'm getting 5% here and you were giving 2% there. But also, one thing that the campus sees is what is the end price we are paying. So it's not that you bump up the price by 3% and then give me 2% back. It's not that. So they'll actually compare apples to apples on the end pricing as well to make sure the campus is actually really benefiting. And I'll tell you this, those money adds up. In my last year when I was working at UFT, and keep in mind, UFT downtown is a huge campus. My food purchasing was over $15 million. And last year that I worked there, only on rebates, we made over $1 million back in one campus. So those monies add up really fast, and especially if it's a bigger campus. But when it comes to a third-party contractor like Sodexo or Aramac or Chartwells, it works a little bit differently. So in a lot of those cases, the campuses don't even see the rebate, but these corporates see the rebate. So even if they're losing, so I'll tell you, when I was with Sodexo, I'm talking 18, 20 years ago, and we were at UFT, and when I joined Sodexo at UFT, I looked at the numbers. In the last 5 years, every year they lost money. Every year they lost $100,000, $150,000. So I went to my boss and says, why are we still here? Why are you losing money to be on this campus? That doesn't make any business sense to me. Then he showed me that if we are getting $1 million in rebates from purchasing, we are actually coming out victorious. We are making so much money on the back end that goes straight to the corporate. Now, campuses have become smart. Campuses try to negotiate with these contractors by saying, okay, how much percentage of kickback are you going to give us? So it's changing as we speak, as people get smarter. I'll give you an example of Ryerson University. So Ryerson University has Chartwells on campus. However, Chartwells does not keep all the rebates. They split the rebate half with Ryerson. So Ryerson gets some part of it back to be reinvested in the food program, because that is a fee account where Ryerson actually spends the money and does everything. So it's really great that they are able to do that. So it can go either way. Now, the other thing that's really important to know is the buying groups. And there could be all different buying groups, and especially this is a group of a company, and they call themselves buying group, who does get all these small campuses or small businesses together and get their buying power together to negotiate contracts with bigger vendors. So if it is a small campus, let's say St. Michael's College in downtown Toronto, they have their purchasing will be maybe $1 million a year. So there's no way they're going to get the same deal as UFT downtown will get. However, let's say CUFSA, which is a buying group, they get 15 of these campuses together, and then they go to Bridor and say, hey, now I've got $15 million of sales. Are you going to give me the same discount as you give UFT? You bet they will. So then the small campus who was just doing $1 million still gets a very big rebate that they wouldn't have got if they went just by themselves. So there's a lot of different companies like Integra, Foodbuy, CUFSA. But the interesting thing to understand is company like Foodbuy, for example. Guess who owns Foodbuy? Compass Group, who owns Chartwells. So they own Foodbuy as well. So now, not only they're getting the small campuses and really accumulating their dollars to negotiate a deal, they also have their big, gigantic purchases in big campuses. They're combining all of them together to go and negotiate a deal. So it can be helpful, but also keep in mind the Chartwells, Compass, Foodbuy, they are getting a lot of that money back to their organizations. So even if, let's say, Chartwells at St. Michael's College will say, oh, we have only 1% profit, if you go look at how much money they're making at the back end, their profit margin now might look like more like 10%. So I think that is something certainly to keep in mind, is how that works. In a lot of cases, the rebates goes back to the campus. In a lot of cases, goes back to the operation, a third-party operation on campus. Like, for example, let's say Chartwell's running their food services in Ryerson. So their Chartwell's at Ryerson might get a percentage of that rebate, but Chartwell's corporate will get a bigger percentage of the rebate. So everybody gets a piece of the pie if it's negotiated the right way. And if a campus administrator who is not so experienced in negotiating They might not even know about this rebate and will leave it on the table. And yay for the private company because they get all of it because they never asked for it. So that happens in a lot of cases too. So it's not unheard of at all. Next slide, please. Okay, so that pretty much, I didn't realize this was the last slide. Wow, awesome. So that pretty much, I know this was a lot of information crammed up in a very short time. So I would say if there is any questions on the chat, Brittany or Jamie, do you want to just read it out if there's anything?
Sure. I can read a question from Gabby. So if a student was to pursue accessing the food service contract with a faculty member, does the request have to specify the names of the people who will read the contract? Or can the contract be shared with other students or meal exchange?
So it totally depends on how you're putting the purpose of why you're accessing. So if you're accessing like this one particular campus I was giving an example of, their reasoning was research, which is really broad because then they share it with us because if there is a legal issue, they can always say, well, Meal Exchange is helping us do the research. They share it with 5 students. They can always say these 5 students are helping with doing the research. But can they really share it with the broader student body or share it on social media? In 99% of the cases, no, because when the Privacy Commission actually gives you the contract, they will tell you that you can't share it. However, if you're using something like a research, once you do a research and have a report, nothing stops you from sharing that report because now you own that report. You don't share the contract, but you share the report. So there are ways of getting around it and spreading the word.
Cool. Yeah. And if any of you need advice on like how to word that or whatever, feel free to reach out if you're kind of unsure.
And
I
in
feel
that
so crooked saying this.
and in that particular case, that campus, the student union is involved, and they're going to be consulting with their the lawyer that they have on pay to figure out exactly how and when they can share it so that they're well prepared. So it might be worth, if you're thinking about, if you have contacts in the student union, you know, creating a partnership there and applying for it together, and so that you can use some of their resources to help you navigate it.
Exactly. And feel free to reach out to a law professor in your campus.
Even better. Yeah.
Even better. They will certainly be able to guide you through what you can do, what you cannot do.
Cool. Another question is, are rebate flows bound by contracts?
Sorry, I did not understand that question. Can you repeat that?
Are the so you know how on the last slide before we had all the different rebate flows, are those are those part of contracts?
Sometimes it can be, sometimes it totally depends. So in a lot of cases nowadays, because the rebate 20 years ago was a very unheard of things, and then everybody started getting smarter. So nowadays they will put it in the contract by saying you got to show us all the purchasing and your purchasing amount. You need to give us X amount of percentage back. And it is that in those cases it is very minimal, maybe 1% or whatever that looks like. But and for a fee account, on the other hand, the campus has full control of all invoices and everything because they are paying. So they know exactly how much money is being spent. They know exactly what the rebate is. So they have this power of knowledge, which in a lot of profit and loss cases they does not, because they have to rely on what the food service company is saying. So if the food service company is crooked, which I'm not saying they are, but if they are crooked and instead of saying we spent $1 million, they come and say we just spent $500,000 on food and here is your 1%, they can't, because there's it's really tough for them to go back, and there is a lot of very creative accounting that can happen as well.
I'm going to kind of paraphrase a couple of ideas here. Do you think that there are government supports or changes that can be made so that these models on campuses put the interests of students first. And then for this, a student provided an example of like the national school food program, if post-secondary was included in that, for example.
So 110%, yes. And the only reason I say that, because this is something that is very close to Meal Exchange's heart, and we are trying to figure out a way. It is the way the systems are right now is food is not really recognized as essential for education. Though we all know that is true. There are researchers in every campus connecting food with education and focusing on education and everything. But the reality is, food is not seen as essential. So, what that means is food services always stays under either ancillary service or business service or whatever they might call it. What that really means in the university language is anything under ancillary or business services, they need to be a no profit, no loss division. So they can't lose money, they can't make a profit out of. But if it went into as an out of the into student life, for example, then this campus has a responsibility of food towards their student. So then it can be slightly subsidized. Then the campus alumni will raise money or whatever needs to happen to subsidize food or to focus on the students in the interest of student to make sure there is good food on campus. So yes, and this can only happen with government regulations. And that is what we as Meal Exchange are really trying to advocate. It is not something that's going to happen overnight. And we are building our advocacy work on that we need food out of business services, ancillary, into student life, or any other division where campuses will recognize the importance of food for education and for life. In Canada, I'm sure everybody probably heard of, and you can see it in my background, food is a human right. And in Canada, we signed on this principle 70 years ago. Well, even till now, there are so many people going to bed hungry. How many of you have gone to bed hungry at some point when you did not afford to get another meal? Many. I know I have. But that is the reality, that the food as a human right is not upheld. And us as students, and I'm going to give my plug-in, Brittany and Jamie, apology for that, because I strongly feel that student power is key to make that change. The elected officials in every level of government, they have their job because they get the vote. And now, post-secondary students and youth having the biggest vote bank in this country, more than the baby boomers, we have the power. We need to go and challenge our elected officials and say, we need this. We need you to stand for us. I can name you countries after countries who have toppled governments. The students have toppled governments because the youth and the students have the power. You have the power. So we need to work together on making these systemic changes.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more question before I wrap up. Are there examples of institutions that include reporting rebates as part of their food service contract if it's profit and loss? And this might increase the transparency between the food service provider and the administration.
So between the food service provider and administration, there is transparency. There's no question about it.
Okay.
But that transparency does not come out of that room. And if that transparency doesn't come out, not to students, not to faculty, not to general administrators, it just stays in a very small room. And that itself is an issue. Because as we said about vendors, there is also a strong relationship building between the campus leaders and the food service companies. And it matters. It certainly matters. There is one campus who have one food service company, and they do a horrible job. I know the chief administrator on the campus, and I've told him n number of times, why do you still have them? Kick them out of here. You can do a much better job yourself. But then he says, yeah, but the CEO, he's a good friend. We play golf every summer. How can I kick them out? It happens. So do you think you're going to get any information from that room? Nope. But between them, there is transparencies because they're buddies. And this is not unheard of at all. It's very common. When I was in a private, when I used to work on a campus, not on a campus, but for a private company, I used to spend at least 30% of my summer on golf courses. It was great. I was getting paid to do that. But
Golf
that's the
holds
key.
too much power in this country.
No, it does, because it's actually, that is relationship building,
Yeah.
which certainly help to keep accounts and keep contracts. So my company would say, yeah, go. You want to buy a tea for some, go for it. It's easy, no problem. We'll pay for it. Go. But that's the way it works.
Okay. I think we can move on just because we're getting close to end time, and we want to obviously talk about tangible things from this. Thank you, Suman. That was really insightful. And honestly, as someone who's been working in this space for a long time, I've learned a lot from going through the process of developing these things. And I think it's really helpful for us as students and people advocating for students to like understand the perspective from the other side, so that we can create the change we want to see. You know, we don't have to change our values, we just have to understand the systems. Yeah, with that in mind, we wanted to leave you with some like tangible things so that it doesn't just feel like a bunch of overwhelming information. We will be sending out the recording and the slide deck after, so don't worry, this won't be lost in this session. But we think a really great step for you is obviously to get to know your campus food services. You might be at different stages of this, but we've linked in this slide deck a worksheet that you can go through, which basically guides you through learning about different actors on your campuses, the policies that might exist, and contracts, all of these things that shape your campus food environment. So we highly suggest making a copy of that and filling it out on your own. It might require a little bit of research, it might require a little bit of reaching out to people, but that'll give you a more informed sense of how to create change. We also know that this was like a pretty packed session, so we're going to host a follow-up to, you know, if you have a chance to learn more about your campus food system through that worksheet, we'll do a bit of a debrief of that, of things you've learned, as well as have an opportunity to strategize areas of opportunity. So we'll be hosting another session in a month. Feel free to drop into that. Another resource I just wanted to plug that we've mentioned before at workshops, and I've linked the instructions and a template here, is stakeholder and power mapping. So this will help you to, if you're first getting involved, learn more about the stakeholders working within your campus food system, as well as help you reflect on who holds the decision-making power, as well as who are those key allies that are going to support you in different ways. Next slide. Yeah, we don't have a ton of time to think about like tools and advocacy and things for change, but we wanted to highlight high level what we think is super important on campuses. And one thing is really the importance of data. Having specific campus food security research can be super helpful, not only to understand what students are experiencing on your campus, but it's also an awesome like advocacy tool. You know, you can use it to show, hey, to, you know, knock on the door of your administration and say, hey, this is a big problem. We tried to tell you before, but now we actually have numbers. So yeah, we would encourage you to see if that research exists on your campus. If it doesn't, there might be ways that you could do that as part of your academic work. We've seen that a lot in the past, where students, as part of a course, will run a student food insecurity survey. So those can be some good options if you think that's a priority on your campus. And then of course, whenever you're doing this work, it's good to do consultations and meetings with different and diverse students to better understand the issues. So research doesn't always have to be a survey. It could be these kind of more qualitative conversations, or I know on some campuses, students have been running kind of a town hall format where a bunch of any student can show up and talk about the food issues they experience. And that's the hope with that, is to inform your work and your advocacy. Yeah, one other thing to mention that we did before is accessing food service contracts. While this can be a time-consuming task, if you think that's important on your campus, there's pretty major issues, you think you can find the support of a faculty person. I loved that advice, Suman. This will really give you a good idea of areas for change and leverage, and help you better understand. So we encourage you, if this is something you're interested in, to kind of follow the set of instructions we included on an earlier slide. Obviously, reach out if you need advice on particular things. And then Suman is generously offered that anyone that gets access to a contract, he's happy to sit down and kind of review that with you. Sit down over Zoom. So feel free to reach out to him. You can they're kind of long documents, so take a couple hours and peel through what it actually means inside of there. Yeah, next slide. And yeah, we wanted to highlight another couple of resources that might be, case studies or examples of change you can work towards on your campus for inspiration. So one is a campus food security principles framework that was recently developed by Meal Exchange in partnership with some other campus partners. So we have a report linked on our website. Essentially, it's a framework meant to evaluate how campuses are doing on student food insecurity in Canada. So it's not measuring food insecurity, but more so making recommendations for all the sorts of things that campuses or students or other stakeholders can implement to increase food security on individual campuses. So I encourage you to take a look at that. The recommendations can definitely, be adapted to your context or your campus, but they might be a nice place to start if you're interested. Perhaps you're hearing from students that they want more healthy, affordable food. So we've included some ideas in there that you could work on with your campus food service provider, for instance, or with another group, based on best practices across the country and other research. Yeah, and lastly is we recently launched a food security initiatives map. So essentially this is a mapping of any organization working on campuses in Canada that's looking to increase access to food for students. So initiatives signed up to be part of the map. You can go there, click on the Campus Food Bank in Alberta and check out what they're doing, what kind of programming they have. Maybe that could be a source of inspiration for what you want to do. And I think most of them include contact information as well. So if you're super inspired by something someone else is doing and want to learn about how to do that on your campus, you could reach out to them and just kind of explore what else is happening on campuses across the country. If you know of things on your campus that aren't currently on the map too, you can have those added. I think there's a sign up form on that page of the website. So all these things are on the resources page of Meal Exchange's website. So feel free to check those out. And next slide. Thanks. Yeah, and just to kind of wrap things up, we really love hosting spaces like this. We hope you found it helpful. We have events like pretty often, almost at minimum once a month. We're also starting or have recently started a new series called Food and Politics, where it's an opportunity for students to interact with elected officials about food issues and really bring food to their minds. It's not something that's on every politician's platform or in their day-to-day thing. Canada has many different departments that interact with food and food policy. So it's really important to bring your voice forward and your experiences about food to local elected officials. So we're hosting 30-minute sessions every once in a while. Next week, we have on May 19th, we have Julie DeBrusen coming for a chat with Suman, and she's an MP in Toronto, and also I think was involved in food policy stuff on the federal level. So you're welcome to RSVP and attend things like that. And we look forward to seeing you in the future. That can all be found on the events page of our website, if I didn't mention. And I think with that, right at 7:30, we are going to wrap up for the night. Thank you everyone for joining us, and for Suman for facilitating that. That was really informative.
Thank you, everybody. Have a very good